I should have known something was terribly wrong the moment Derek abruptly ended his phone call and shoved his cell into his pocket, his face taut with tension. My husband had been taking an abnormal number of private calls lately, always stepping away to murmur furtively, like he had some big secret to hide. As he rejoined me on the living room couch, I studied his expression, trying to gauge his mood. "Everything okay, babe?" I ventured carefully. "You've seemed preoccupied lately." Derek avoided my gaze, letting out a strained chuckle. "It's nothing, Lena, just some dumb thing at work, that's all." His fingers tapped an agitated rhythm on the couch cushion as he forced a tight smile. "So what did you want to talk about?" Something in the pit of my stomach twisted sharply, warning me that he was hiding something serious. But I opted not to push further, at least not yet. "Well, I was hoping we could discuss our savings plan for the nursery remodel. Have you had a chance to look at the contractor quotes I emailed you?" His body stiffened, and those telltale worry lines creased his forehead. "About that," he began slowly, "I've been meaning to mention that I talked to my mom recently. She thinks we should hold off on the remodel for now." I blinked, struggling to comprehend. "What? Why would she say that?" A tendril of dread began unfurling in my chest. "She just thinks it's unwise to sink so much money into renovations with the way things are so uncertain right now," Derek said evasively. "The economy and all, you know. Maybe we should play it safe for a while." My pulse quickened as realization dawned. "Wait, does this have something to do with that big opportunity your mom wants you to invest in?" I demanded, unable to conceal the sharpness in my tone. "The one you two have been so secretive about." Derek frowned, suddenly looking dismayed, like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Now, Lena, don't get worked up. It's just a little side business venture that could really pay off big in the long run." "That little venture is blowing through our life savings behind my back." I shot back, anger and betrayal roiling inside me, while I'm over here thinking we're on the same team, planning for our baby's future. Lurching to my feet, I paced in short, agitated bursts, my voice rising in incredulous disbelief. "I can't believe you'd let your mother manipulate you into gambling away everything we've worked for, all for some shady get-rich-quick scheme she's peddling." Derek stood as well, palms raised in a placating gesture as he took a step towards me. "Lena, calm down, okay? You're overreacting. Mom knows what she's doing. This investment is rock solid. Once we get the payoff, we'll be sitting pretty. No more money worries." I stared at the man I'd naively thought was my loving partner, unable to recognize him in that moment. How could I have been so blind to the truth slowly unraveling before my eyes? As if on cue, Derek's phone buzzed again with another incoming call, no doubt from his manipulative puppet master. The harsh reality slammed into me with sickening clarity. My husband's heart and loyalty no longer belonged to me. Not really. I was just another piece on the board, another player for Evelyn to control and subjugate through her web of lies and scheme. And I had a terrible feeling that her games were only just beginning. The weeks that followed were a waking nightmare. Evelyn's rock-solid investment predictably imploded in spectacular fashion, draining our life savings in what amounted to an elaborate financial shakedown. As Derek broke the devastating news, the fury etched in his expression made it clear where he placed the blame. "I can't believe you let this happen," he erupted, spit flying. "If you had just been supportive instead of fighting me every step, none of this would have gone south." I gaped at him, stunned by the venom and audacity of his misdirected rage. Before I could formulate a reply, the doorbell rang with the shrill, incessant ringing that could only be Evelyn. Derek threw up his hands and stormed off to let his mother in. The moment she swept into the living room in a floral moo-moo, her beady eyes lasered in on me with piercing accusation. "Well, I should have known," she tutted, shaking her head slowly. "We had a good thing going, and you just couldn't keep your doubts to yourself, could you?" Bewildered, I opened and closed my mouth, momentarily robbed of speech. I never said anything to undermine." "Oh, don't play dumb with me, Lena," Evelyn sneered, waddling closer until I could smell her stale, cream-puff breath. "If you had been fully on board, lending your undivided support, my son's venture would have succeeded." Derek hovered behind his mother, nodding in sullen agreement. The The sight of my own husband siding against me, drinking in his mother's toxic lies, was like a vice around my heart. I drew myself up as tall as I could manage, anger and defiance coursing through me. "That's a loop and you know it, Evelyn. This had nothing to do with me. The feds were onto your shady scheme from the start." Evelyn's eyes flashed with undisguised malice. For a fleeting moment, I thought she might actually strike me before she caught herself. Everything has gone wrong because of you," she seethed, jabbing her pink sausage finger aggressively into my chest. I flinched at the vehemence of her tirade, my hand instinctively cradling my still flat abdomen, protecting the life growing inside me. Derek regarded my gesture with apparent disdain. "Yeah, great going, Lena. Way to start our family off on the right track. Flat broke, all because you couldn't have a little faith in us." The cruelty and callousness of his words sliced deep. How had I fallen so far from the man I thought I knew? Trusted and loved, even? Before my tortured thoughts could run away from me, Evelyn's reedy cackle pierced the tension. "Oh, don't worry, Derry," she cooed, patting his arm in a show of oily reassurance. "This is just a temporary setback. We just need to rethink our strategy, that's all." Her flinty gaze settled on me again, glinting with an unmistakable malice. Whatever her twisted agenda entailed, I knew one thing with chilling certainty. I would never be free of Evelyn's manipulative venom. Not unless I fought back with every last ounce and cunning I could muster. As much as the prospect sickened me, I realized that only one of us would emerge victorious from the grim battle looming ahead. For the sake of my unborn child's future, I had no choice but to ensure that victory would belong to me. In a desperate bid to salvage what remained of my fracturing marriage, I suggested Derek and I look into couples counseling. To my surprise, he didn't immediately balk at the idea. "You know what? You might be onto something there," he said, tone uncharacteristically agreeable. "This whole mess has been really hard on both of us. Maybe having an objective third party could help get our relationship back on track." I nodded, tentatively hopeful at his willingness. "I think it's exactly what we need to work through this and move forward as partners. For the baby's sake." Derek's expression clouded briefly at the mention of the baby, that same flickering hesitation I'd noticed whenever our child came up. But he pasted on a reassuring smile. "You're absolutely right. I'll make some calls. See about setting up our first session." True to his word, Derek booked our initial counseling appointment for the following week. But in the days leading up to it, his behavior shifted once more into that unsettling realm of secrecy and preoccupation. My suspicions escalated when he abruptly announced a last-minute business trip that would conveniently span our entire therapy window. "You're just going to blow off counseling after I agreed to it?" I challenged him, unable to hide my dismay. "Derek, we can't keep avoiding our problems forever. That's what got us into this mess to begin with." He dismissed my protestations with an airy wave. "Relax, it's just a little golf weekend with some potential clients. But you know what? You're right. Putting off counseling would be counterproductive. Why don't you come along?" My brow furrowed with confusion. "Come, along? To your business trip?" "Sure. Could be fun." Derek replied with a disarming chuckle. "We can use the resort's couples services, have some nice relaxing spa time while we're there. Maybe fit in a massage or two after my meetings each day." The jovial pitch put me immediately on guard. Derek acted entirely too eager, too polished in his sales patter, like he was reciting from a carefully rehearsed script rather than being genuinely spontaneous. Against my better judgment, I hesitantly agreed to accompany him. Looking back, that singular lapse in discernment would ultimately serve as the tipping point that sent my life into irreversible freefall. The seaside resort we checked into appeared pleasant enough on its manicured surface. White sandy beaches, poolside cabanas, luxury spa amenities. But I couldn't shake an ominous pall lurking just beneath that postcard-ready facade. Those unshakable misgivings cemented into sheer dread when we made our way to the private bungalows where Derek claimed his meetings would be held. Because looming among the quaint cottages, her floral muumuu and pinched glower, unmistakable even from a distance, was the last person on earth I wanted to see right then. My scheming, conniving mother-in-law. And in that soul-withering moment when Derek's eyes met Evelyn's with a subtle, knowing nod, I realized too late that I had been lured into her latest trap, one from which there might be no escape. The hot, salty breeze stung my eyes as Derek and I approached the cluster of bungalows where Evelyn waited, her arms folded tightly in dissatisfied judgment. Several other figures milled about, solemn-faced men and women I didn't recognize. "What is this?" I hissed at Derek through a tight smile, desperately hoping this was all some misguided surprise he had planned. "Who are these people?" Before he could respond, Evelyn stepped forward, her expression a chilling mask of smug resolve. "Good, you're here," she said flatly. "We've been expecting you, Lena. It's time we had a long overdue reckoning." The words were ominous, layered with threatening undercurrents. My chest tightened as dread took hold. "Mother, maybe we should have some privacy to talk," Derek stammered, suddenly looking less certain than when we'd arrived. But Evelyn shushed him with a curt wave of her hand. "There will be no more talking in circles. We're done with niceties. It's time for the truth to finally come out, for Lena's own good." One of the other women, a stern-looking blonde in a pantsuit, cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should move this inside, where it will be contained." My heart pounded furiously as I was ushered into the nearest bungalow, sensing I had no choice but to cooperate, at least for now. The others filed in silently and arrayed themselves in a semicircle of hard-backed chairs facing a weathered love seat where I was instructed to sit. Evelyn assumed a position at the head of the makeshift assembly, her cold stare locking onto me. "You've been a source of negativity and strife from the moment you came into this family, Lena, poisoning my son's mind with your doubts and ingratitude time and again. It's why we currently find ourselves in such profound difficulties." The words seemed ludicrous, laughable in their sheer audacity, and yet they were delivered with such biting certainty that my rebuke withered on my lips. "Our objective today is to remedy that toxic influence through truth and accountability," Evelyn pressed on, undeterred. "We will persist until you acknowledge and confess your failings as a wife and soon-to-be mother. Only then can you atone and be reintegrated on the path of righteousness." The room blurred around me as the full, horrific realization crystallized. This wasn't merely some twisted reckoning in Evelyn's mind. It was a systematic attempt to break me, to strip away my identity and remake me in her own warped image. But I wouldn't go down without a fight. "You're the one who has poisoned this family," I spat out, struggling to keep my voice from shaking with rage and desperation. "With your lies and schemes, using Derek as your puppet to control me." "Lies?" Evelyn's eyes flashed with indignation. "The only lies here are the ones you've allowed into this family through your selfish resistance." In an instant, the others were on their feet, hurling their own accusations in a dizzying torrent of verbal lashings. I cringed back into the love seat as their voices rose in fervor, drowning me in wave after wave of recrimination and scorn. Somewhere in the chaos, Derek watched impassively, making no move to intercede or calm the escalating ambush, like a damning harbinger of where his true allegiances would forever lie, with his mother, no matter how depraved her manipulations. As the onslaught reached its fevered peak, something inside me fractured. I finally understood that there would be no victory for me here today, no matter how righteous my defiance. Not against these overwhelming forces arrayed to systematically deconstruct my sense of self. The only way to escape from this nightmare was to play along, to acquiesce in hopes of surviving long enough to strike back later when I held the advantage. To live to fight another day, as much as that singular thought lacerated my very soul, even if that day might never come. I have no idea how long the harrowing intervention lasted. Time seemed to blur and distort as hours of psychological torment blended together. All I knew was that by the end, I was left utterly depleted, slumped in the love seat while flecks of spittle dried on my skin. Evelyn sneered victoriously as she proclaimed the session concluded. "Get some rest, Lena. We'll reconvene in the morning to accept your full confession." Still shaking, I watched through hollow eyes as her cabal of cohorts filed out. Only Derek remained behind, not quite meeting my gaze. I should have stopped them," he mumbled, sounding more like a sullen teenager than a grown man. "But you have to admit, you brought a lot of this on yourself, antagonizing Mom at every turn." The words lanced through what little remained of my tattered self-worth. I wanted to lash out, to rage and scream at this pitiful excuse for a man, but the futility of it rendered me mute. Without another word, Derek turned and left me alone in the dimly lit bungalow, shutting the door with a dull thud of finality. The desolate quiet that followed was somehow more oppressive than the torrent of verbal assaults I'd just endured. I'm not sure how long I remained there in that emaciated husk of a state, dwelling in my despair. But at some point, a faint inner voice sparked to life, almost inaudible at first. You cannot give up now, not when so much is at stake. The thought crystallized like a revelation, focusing my fracturing psyche. Because Derek and his wretched mother were right about one thing. They had underestimated me. Seen me as weak, as a broken spirit ready to surrender completely. But in that moment, I tapped into a reserve of strength from somewhere deep inside. The part of me that drew from a primal well, a maternal drive to safeguard the innocent life gestating within me. My child's life. Almost mechanically, I rose from the love seat and surveyed my surroundings with new alertness. A sliver of pre-dawn light filtered through the bungalow's bay window, illuminating the outline of a heavy wooden chair propped beneath the latch. A security measure, no doubt to keep me contained. Inching towards the chair, I hefted its solid weight experimentally before hoisting it up and slamming it squarely into the window. The glass fractured in a satisfying spray of shards. I bashed at it again and again, undeterred even as my knuckles grew slick with blood. Sharpened determination propelled me until I had created an opening wide enough to slip through. The cool caress of morning beach air danced across my clammy skin as I hauled myself over the sill and dropped gracelessly onto the sand below, wincing at the bite of stray shards. My escape was far from assured, but sheer adrenaline fortified my battered body with a potent second wind. I sprinted away from the bungalow as fast as my legs could carry me, following the faint illumination of the rising sun towards the unknown. Freedom was still just a fragile hope glimmering on the horizon, but it was a future I would fight like hell to claim, one painstaking step after another, no matter how daunting the odyssey ahead might be. For the sake of my child, merely surviving was no longer an option. I would find a way to fight back and win. The days and weeks after my harrowing escape from that nightmare resort passed in a blur. Staying one step ahead of Derek and Evelyn's efforts to track me down consumed every waking moment. I couldn't risk going to the authorities, not yet. With their wealth and influence, they would surely turn it into a vicious custody battle that I might not win in my current delicate condition. No, I needed to play this smarter, gather insurmountable evidence of their depravity first. My parents took me in without question, offering shelter and lending what financial support they could. It shamed me to put them at risk by involving them at all, but I was out of options. During those tense months, I meticulously compiled documentation of every step of Derek and Evelyn's duplicitous campaign against me. Financials, witness testimony, surveillance photos, anything and everything that could be leveraged. There was no margin for error. My case would need to be irrefutable. When my baby bump finally became unmistakable, Derek made his first attempt at contact since abandoning me at the resort. The message was lengthy, saccharine-laced with feigned contrition and platitudes about putting our difficulties behind us. But the underlying message was unmistakable. He and Evelyn were growing desperate to regain control. I was tempted, for a fleeting moment, to respond with a blistering rebuke and lay my cards on the table. But that would merely sacrifice my advantage while accomplishing nothing. So I remained silent and kept building my case. As expected, their efforts escalated from there. Evelyn's flying monkeys sniffed around my parents' home a few times until I was forced to relocate again. I caught strangers furtively trying to snap pictures of me on the street, no doubt seeking ammunition to support claims of my unfitness. The final straw came when a bulky man shoved an expired court summons into my hands outside the Ob-Gyn clinic following a checkup. The paper was meaningless, a fabricated ruse to rattle me, but it revealed just how far they were willing to go. If I didn't strike first, there was no limit to the damage they'd try to inflict when the baby arrived, which is why I swallowed my trepidation and sought out the best family law firm in the state. Sitting across from that cool-eyed senior partner, I finally laid out the entire sordid truth for the first time, holding nothing back. To their credit, the attorneys mastered their revulsion at the more horrific details, absorbing it all with clinical detachment. But I could see the calculated gears turning as they recognized the unbridled legal firestorm this case could unleash. Less than 48 hours later, Evelyn and Derek were slapped with a temporary restraining order and barrage of subpoenas, clawing back years of financial data, communications, and records pertaining to their corrosive scheme. The element of surprise was complete. They never saw it coming. When Derek frantically called to plead his case, I savored every syllable of his desperate, impotent blubbering. I imagined his mother going into conniptions, her deranged sense of entitlement crumbling. And in that moment I pitied them both in a way. Evelyn's scorched earth parenting, her vitriolic need to control those around her, had ultimately transformed her into precisely the monster unleashed upon me. And Derek's Faustian bargain had shackled him to that all-consuming toxicity. But pity is a grace they never once afforded me. The coming year would see my own hardships escalate in ways I could scarcely fathom. A new mother fighting tooth and nail, both as a protective parent and an impassioned legal combatant. But thanks to my resolve and strategic groundwork, I held the high ground. It was only a matter of time before karma inserted the final pieces to bring Derek and Evelyn's depraved ambition to its kneecap, and I would be lying if I said I didn't plan to savor every last minute. The months following my preemptive legal strike were a grinding gauntlet of litigation and personal attacks. Derek and Evelyn responded to my bombshell lawsuit with a vengeance, churning out lies and false allegations rapid fire. Fortunately, my own airtight documentation blunted the worst of their smear campaign. Still, having to counter increasingly outlandish claims about everything from faking my pregnancy to suffering from mental instability took a grueling toll. I was utterly drained by the time I finally gave birth to my son, Liam. That first moment, cradling his squirming little form, tears of joy and relief streaming down my face, remains the purest memory from that entire nightmare, uncorrupted by the toxicity swirling around us. For a few fleeting days, I allowed myself to soak in the splendor of new motherhood, letting the lingering stresses recede into the background. I knew the reprieve was temporary, but I selfishly safeguarded those moments as long as I could. The bubble burst when I was served with Derek's motion for emergency custody. The paperwork read like Evelyn's manifesto regurgitated in legalese, complete with florid claims that I had effectively kidnapped Liam and posed a danger to him unless he was immediately removed from my care. My own attorneys assured me the motion was little more than a delayed intimidation tactic aimed at sabotaging my case momentum. Still, I couldn't shake the bone-deep fear of having my infant son wrested from my arms. My dread only escalated when our first courtroom showdown landed me face-to-face with Derek and Evelyn once again. Their snarling contempt hit me like a physical force as the vitriol began spewing. "This pathetic fantasy has gone on quite long enough," Evelyn proclaimed with a dismissive sneer. "We tried putting you on the path to redemption, but you insist on resisting to the detriment of my grandson. This is no life for a child." I fought to keep my breathing steady, struggling against the instinct to lash out. My attorneys had prepped me extensively on not rising to their verbal baits. Derek took the baton, his glowering expression more hangdog than threatening. "Just let us bring Liam home where he belongs, Lena, with people who actually care about giving him a stable life. Not whatever this is." He made a vague, disparaging gesture which caused Evelyn to tut loudly in disgust. The well-choreographed good cop, bad cop routine was so transparent, so patently patronizing after all we had endured. "Do you ever stop to hear the deranged vitriol dribbling from your own mouths?" I said at last, adrenaline emboldening me. "We both know this has never truly been about Liam's well-being. It's about controlling anything and everything around you until it bends to your twisted demands." Evelyn started, her mouth working furiously as she prepared to unleash another volley of abuse. But the judge's stern gavel cut her off with an irritated clap. "Mrs. Bowen, that's more than enough," His Honor intoned firmly. "No further outbursts or I'll have the bailiffs remove you." Fuming, Evelyn subsided into seething silence. Derek appeared to shrink slightly, chastened by his failed ploy. For perhaps the first time in his life, he seemed to register just how frail their position had become. It was the first small but unmistakable shift in momentum, the start of their unraveling before an increasingly skeptical legal system. I left that day's proceedings holding Liam a little tighter, bolstered by the knowledge that their persecution was cracking at long last. There would undoubtedly be more horrors to come before the final rulings. But like an offshore storm finally breaking, I sensed their dark era of control over our lives had finally reached its apex. Soon, everything they'd sown through deceit and malice would begin reaping its most profound consequence. And this time, there would be no more mercy from me, not after the depravities they'd inflicted on me and my child. This time, they would answer for it all and know true karma. The culmination finally arrived nearly a year to the day after my desperate escape from that nightmare resort getaway Evelyn had orchestrated. All the discovery maneuvering, pre-trial posturing, and failed sideshow motions led to this, a final, protracted court battle that would decide the fates of everyone involved. Derek and Evelyn's smugness had steadily eroded with each rebuffed attempt to regain leverage, but their defiance remained obstinate. I had to hand it to them. They played their losing hand with a zeal that bordered on delusional. When we entered the courthouse on that crisp October morning, Evelyn turned to sneer at me with her customary disdain. "Enjoy this circus while it lasts, you ungrateful shrew. Soon, the decent, stable world I've fought to preserve for my grandson will be restored." I said nothing, unwilling to justify her provocation with a response. My sole focus was getting Liam situated with the court-appointed guardian who would be supervising him throughout the grueling proceedings. The trial itself was every bit as drawn-out and emotionally grueling as expected. Evelyn's legal team launched salvo after salvo of character attacks, revisiting every perceived maternal shortcoming in grandiose detail. I sat stoically through it all, following my own attorney's impeccable guidance. I knew their scattershot smears wouldn't connect with the jurors, not with the overwhelming documentation and testimony we had marshaled. When it was finally time for me to take the stand, there was an unmistakable sense of shift in the courtroom atmosphere. 12 pairs of eyes followed my every measured movement, all preliminary biases and assumptions giving way to rapt attention. From there, I simply talked. Spoke plainly and honestly about the nightmare I'd endured at the hands of Derek and his venomous mother. I recounted the lies and manipulations in granular detail, leaving nothing out, no matter how unsavory. Evelyn thrashed indignantly at times until the judge threatened her with contempt. Derek sat motionless, eyes downcast, vaguely reminiscent of those first fitful moments when his self-delusions began cracking. I don't know how long I held the jury enthralled, but by the time I was let off the stand, there could be no ambiguity about the profound impact my testimony had made. Several jurors wore expressions of dismay and disbelief. They had witnessed evil firsthand. Derek and Evelyn's subsequent attempts to redeem their case took on a rote hollowness after that. Neither mustered any believable passion for their fabricated narratives, as if some deep part of them had finally acknowledged their descent into self-parody. The final blow landed when forensic accountants took the stand and meticulously detailed the RICO-laden financial fraud underpinning Evelyn's ill-fated business. Investment, my family's hard-earned life savings ruthlessly squandered. After that, the jury's deliberations were little more than a formality. In the end, I was awarded full custody of Liam as well as a substantial multi-million-dollar judgment against Evelyn and her syndicate of grifters. Derek's reputation and future career prospects were summarily annihilated. It was a complete legal massacre on a scale of humiliation even I had not foreseen. While I relished the delicious karmic karma of the moment, there was no sense of elation or relief when the verdicts came down. My gaze lingered on Derek as his pallid, haggard expression registered the devastating finality of it all. A grown man rendered infantile and broken on the altar of one woman's monstrous obsession with control. I thought maybe a shred of remorse might flicker across his face, some profound regret for having sacrificed everything to his mother's malignant influences. But his stare remained blank and empty, 2 decades of brainwashing too entrenched to ever overcome. "Have your victory, then, you spiteful witch," Evelyn hissed vehemently at me, mercifully concluding her reign of terror with one last sputtering outburst as the bailiffs led her away. We'll see how long your house of lies stands when the truth about you inevitably surfaces. As the courtroom finally cleared out, I pulled Liam close and pressed my lips to the crown of his downy head. Looking into those innocent, adoring eyes, I knew I had emerged victorious. But it was a victory wrought from desperation and hardship, a rite of fire that had steeled me with an alloy resilience. No further vindictiveness or bitterness remained, only a bone-deep resolve to shepherd my son's life towards promise, at long last unshackled from Evelyn's corrosive reach. The ordeal had remade me, uncompromised and finely honed, to ensure Liam's future would be one of compassion and selfless purpose, and that would be the realest, most enduring justice of all.